So, I've been asked to have everyone grab another beer because we have to reach our drink limit, so get another beer. And I need to thank Jamie, the sound guy, for making sure that we're all on top of this. And don't forget to tip your waitress. I've been told by Joe, don't forget to tip your waitress. Okay, are we good? So, hi, I'm Tracy Quitasol. I'm with OMD's Ignition Factory. I have with me Jonathan Nelson from Omnicom, Monik Sanghvi from Organic, Azher Ahmed from DDB, Mark Fortner from Blippar, and Seth Bardelas from EVRYTHNG. We're here to talk about the Internet of Things. So of all the things we want to talk about, guys, it's such an ill-defined topic. How do you define it? It's the Internet on things, of thing, everything. What is it? Describe it.
Are you looking at me?
Yeah, I'm looking at you.
I just want to say this is so great to be on stage at the Continental Club. This is the best small club in America. I feel like I've spent my entire career to get right here.
So you can hum a few bars or sing?
Huge fan. Anyways, and it's very weird to talk about the Internet of Things at the Continental Club, but Internet of Things to me is sort of the Internet of everything else, meaning we all know what it is in terms of cell phones and desktops and all that. This is really, we're talking about an operating system for every other thing, you know, whether it's that neon sign or these fans or the refrigerator, which I know sounds sort of absurd, but when you're actually running something like a club, you need to know whether your lights are on, whether your fridges are working, all of those things. So the Internet of Things to me is just the wiring of everything else.
So as we think, does anyone have anything to add for that definition? Because it is fairly broad, it's ill-defined, but how do we help define it for marketers because it is so broad?
So I think to build on that, for me, if I think about what that is in the context of what it enables, how marketers can leverage it, it's really nothing more than things being able to talk to other things, right? So the internet was built, the internet enabled a fundamentally different way of humans to be able to connect and talk and communicate. And the Internet of Things does that to help things talk to each other. And I think that's, for me, if that's the one thing you take away from it, all it does is enables things to communicate with each other, which simplifies our lives because it takes sometimes people out of the way and enable things to happen more automatically.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the physical. Whoa, that's way too close. It's kind of the physical aspects of technology coming out and meeting people where they are. So the old model of, go home, get on your desktop, type something into a browser and hope that things happen. Mobile's helped a lot with that, but I think the IoT piece will help enable a lot more of it where you are, where you expect in a more natural way.
Just one thing. I think the way we think about it is that we're actually evolving from the Internet of Things to this idea of the Internet on Things. And so when you think about President Obama wears a Fitbit. He doesn't have to go to his computer to check his steps. You have your Nest in your home. Your shades can be controlled from your phone. Everything is now completely wireless. And now with augmented reality, you can actually turn on objects like that sign, like a beer bottle. So everything is potentially a wired experience.
Yeah, I mean, when we take a look at the Internet of Things, it is machine to machine, but it's also how do people engage within that ecosystem, right? So how can my door locks talk to my window shades in a way that actually benefits me at the core, right? So I think when people think of the Internet of Things, they always think of one machine talking to another. And actually, we see a huge opportunity for consumers to actually engage with things, whether that is a bottle of soda, whether it's a refrigerator, whether it's the neon sign that we speak of. But what role do actually people have into that? Because they are a thing in the sense that we have a phone in our pocket. That mobile device can actually bridge me into an experience, right? And bridge me into engaging with that thing, whatever that thing may be.
Yeah, so I want to ask someone, as we kind of think about that, are all consumers using their phone to connect to the Internet of Things? Because I think as marketers, we're looking at how do I keep hearing about it, how do I help consumers connect to that? But is it the phone? Is it my Netflix?
I think it depends on the thing, right? So there are some things that you'll need your phone to be the bridge, right? And there are other products, so I don't have to say things all the time. There are other products that, like the Fitbit, that you don't need your phone to actually be engaged, right? So that can actually connect to the cloud by itself, right? So it depends on the trigger and the technology that's built into that product or device.
Yeah, so as you guys are, everyone has kind of a different perspective of this, but as we think about it, how do brands build out that strategy? Because everyone has a smartphone in their pocket now. So how do brands build out that strategy of an Internet of Things strategy?
So for me, it's, and I know we always hear this, like I need a mobile strategy, I need a Facebook strategy, I now need an Internet of Things strategy. And I'd encourage our brand clients to think of it just slightly different. And that is, your role as a brand is based on your brand values to somehow make something in your consumer's life easier, better, simple, faster, something. That is the role that your brand has. And you do it in a fun way, or you do it in a design-esque way. You have ways that you do that. And for me, the Internet of Things, or enabling thing-to-thing communication, whether that thing is a person, or that thing is a machine, or that thing is a sign, the way the brand should be thinking about it is if my brand's role in my consumer's life is to add value in such and such way, whatever that may be, how can I take advantage of the fact that things can now speak with each other to further improve the experience that my consumer is having, further improve and add value to his or her experience, his or her life? So rather than having an Internet of Things strategy, it's really a customer experience strategy rooted in your brand values, enabled by the fact that things can now talk to other things.
I think one of the things, a statistic that we love that's really interesting, is that there are actually more products and brands sold around the world on a daily basis than there are YouTube views and Google searches combined. And what's interesting about that is that you have all of these products sitting on shelves in stores that are actually media. And what's exciting about that is that now that can be those products and brands can be turned on in ways that they never were before. So when prior to the Internet on Things, you could walk by a shelf and you might literally just walk by, and that product could only speak to you depending on where it is, what color the packaging is. Now it can actually tell a story. And that's really exciting to be able to unleash that.
Yeah, your IoT strategy is your brand strategy at the end of the day. So, it's the same thing we say with digital strategy as well. So how do those products and services intersect in a natural way? But also, we got to keep a lens on that while consumer experience is important, and we've got to be respectful of what people are willing to give in terms of information and how they're willing to play, we still have things to sell. So how do we naturally find ways to enhance behaviors, but also disrupt where we need to be in the right way to ultimately sell product?
So I want to touch on this notion that every brand, as I walk down the grocery store, has a story to tell. And I think everyone has Minority Report in their mind when you say that, like all these things talking at me. Let's just talk a little bit about, it's the strategy and it's telling a story, but how far do you go? What do you do with that in that storytelling mechanism? What is the storytelling as part of that?
Because I've always said that, I think, when you think of we think of brands as people, and people have stories to tell, but you wouldn't necessarily tell that story in different places. But there are stories that are interesting, and the story could be as simple as what are the ingredients, or how can I use it, or what recipes are in there. And it could be a kind of a story that you might ask a brand, say, I want to know more, as you walk down the shelf, because there could be information that inherently you otherwise might not have. But agreed, it might not be. You wouldn't want to walk down the aisle and have everybody screaming at you, as you wouldn't want to walk into a room or a bar or everything and have everybody screaming at you.
Yeah, and we were talking a little bit about this earlier, but it's not just, take the broadcast mindset and apply it to a whole new layer of new places to broadcast. So it's not just storytelling, but it's, story sharing, it's story listening, and ultimately starting a conversation where things naturally fit.
So do you want to build on that and tell me a little bit about how do you nurture that story, right? Once you've done an IoT thing on a box of cereal, how do you keep that going for the consumer? that type of storytelling that they're expecting them. They're expecting their cereal box to talk to them.
I think you guys working with cereal boxes.
When they haven't
There's a couple. There's a couple ways. So, the nurturing of the story is a really interesting idea. If you go and you have an augmented reality experience with a product, and then you go back and have the same experience, it's the same story. But what's exciting about being able to, turn on a product is that it can change. So where you have, a television commercial, it's the same. Where whenever you see that, it's the same commercial. But you could go to that cereal box, and if you experience it in the store, it might tell you about why you should buy it or why it's interesting. When you're at home, it could be a different experience. When you're in the morning, you might have recipes for breakfast. In the afternoon, it might be recipes for cookies. So it can change, and I think the most important part is that the story should involve the person, as you were saying, and the person's the most important part, and to be a part of that story, and to have that journey together in a way that's really meaningful, that they want to come back and experience it more.
I also think, we spend a lot of times thinking about the marketing communication implications of things, and therefore it's storytelling. It's about the story I'm trying to tell. Oftentimes, and I think Internet of Things and lots of other digital technologies and data enables us to connect brand, that lofty brand story thing, with demand. It's your whole notion of demand chain type stuff from a long time ago. In a way that it's not storytelling, it's a way of story proving. Right? It's I'm going to tell you this story about who I'm about and what I'm representing. You're going to buy into that story, and that's why you consider me. But then I have all these other touch points by which I shouldn't just be thinking about how do I reinforce that story and what else do I say? Because, just like any friend, right? If all you do is you've got a friend and all they're doing is talking about themselves, you get a little bored. You want that friend, you want that person, right, to deliver on that. And so I think IoT, again, this whole notion of if I'm in an aisle, or it's my fridge talking to my phone when I'm in the aisle. I don't, there's so many other opportunities to leverage this technology to reinforce the story by proving it, by being there for the customer, by serving the customer at that moment of need, at that point in time where they need it.
I think the value proposition of brands is really shifting here, where we're looking at. We've talked a lot just now about communication outwards, using the Internet of Things to activate kind of a broad, almost like product as broadcast. But I think it's much more than that. The brand as a promise, the brand as trying to create value for a consumer, reinforcing that. And so whether that's a narrative like what we've just been talking about, or whether it's using the Internet of Things to really augment the value proposition of the brand in the way that it interacts in people's lives on a daily basis, I think that's the thing that really gets me interested in this, because we've spent a lot of time just sort of talking at people and broadcasting messages, and now not only do we have another touch point, but we can fulfill on the brand promises as product a lot better using these new technologies.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point about strategy, right? Is it a broadcast medium? Is it a one-time campaign? When your product is always on, in a sense, your product and consumers always expect to engage with it. It's a daunting thing for a brand. That brand always has to have a message. And it has to be relevant. It has to be personalized. There has to be a reason why I engage with that product. So you don't look at smart campaigns as a single campaign. You look at your strategy and how your campaigns actually play a role within your product's life. So it's a different taking, particularly for when we work with agencies around how do you actually tell that story continuously, because your product is always on, right? And those consumers expect to engage with and expect to receive something back personalized.
Well, go ahead, Mark.
One thing that's really interesting, and not to bore people in a bar about data, but coming out of that, when you, and I'm not the data guy, but anyway, coming out of, when you experience and have a one-to-one interaction with a product, we can take that data and understand physically where you were and what you did, and it becomes real-world data. And what ends up happening is we learn things about how people are interacting with products in different times of the day in their lives that we might not suspect, which can then make the other parts of the advertising mix much more effective and smarter, which is really a nice benefit of the whole thing as well.
And I may be the minority here because I'm Pakistani.
You are the minority.
You know what I'm saying. There's a novelty right now to what's happening. You know, a lot of people don't know about it, and there's a surprise and delight element where people may say, hey, what was this thing? I didn't expect this. We're getting it with our South by Southwest apps every time we're in a proximity of something. So I would encourage brands, at least in the test and learn, to take advantage of some of those pioneer tests and then ultimately settle wherever you think you're going to have the long ball kind of happening.
Yeah, I want to address, and I feel like there has to be a joke. A man walks into the bar and starts talking about data, but I won't go there. But I do want to talk a little bit about data, because how do brands avoid not being creepy with the data, right? You know all of these things about them. You can hit them when they're in the grocery store and when they're at home, but how do you shape your messaging and your strategy to support when it's on or in proximity when it's supposed to be on?
I mean, if I could just chime in, I think it's being self-aware. You know, I think we're seeing it happen in other media as well, but I think when you're doing something that people aren't used to seeing, you've got to acknowledge the fact that it is new, it might be a little creepy, it might be a little unusual, but here's why we're standing here and here's why we're talking to you in this new context that you may not be used to seeing us in. And ultimately reassuring them that we're not harvesting your data for nefarious purposes.
I think it's in how you use the data, right? Just because you have it. And the unique thing with Internet of Things, it's one of the first times that the brands themselves are actually owning that data and pulling back that data from the product engagements, right? They're not buying that data through a media company, let's say, right? Because that's their product, right? They're able to do that. So when we work with the agencies, they're able to work with how do brands connect? How do I tell that story? And from a data perspective, you just have to be smart. You have to be very careful at the beginning of how you use the data. As consumers get more comfortable with it, you can maybe leak a little bit more out or make things a little more personalized, which usually means to use more data. But at the beginning, you first have to show that value, and working with your agency partners is a great way to kind of build that strategy out.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add, I don't think the aspiration to avoid feeling creepy is even a reasonable one. I mean, I think to this notion of testing and learning, as long as your intent is to try to add value to the customer in some way, shape, or form, again, your brand is built to provide some type of value, making life better, simple, faster, easier, more enjoyable, whatever it is. And as long as your intent is pure in being able to leverage that to provide more value, you're going to test and learn. You're going to try things. Some things might feel a little creepy, and those things you'll either iterate to make them feel less creepy or you'll throw them away. And the things that you find to work, those are the things that you'll scale. And I think that's the way in which you can get into this space without this, like, I'm never going to be creepy. I just don't think that's possible. But as long as your intent is good, intent is pure, customers will give you the benefit of the doubt, and the things that work, those are the things you scale.
See, now I take a bit of an issue with that. I think that we have the ability to be very, very scary with a lot of our clients, with a lot of the consumers, and I think we need to move slowly, because as we've seen, privacy and data it evolves over time, and I would say start off very, very cautiously. Being creepy is a bad thing. I don't think we like it in our lives as consumers, as individuals. I don't think it's a great trait for clients. And so I would say tread slowly and cautiously. I mean, we've got a long road ahead of us, and we need to figure this out, and we need to figure out what is appropriate for a brand. And I think the scariness, the creepiness factor, the ability that we can to track people if we turn it on, it freaks me out as a consumer, and I think it's a scary thing as someone advising clients. So I think we need to be very, very careful doing this.
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about that, because that level of cautiousness, how do we help brands tiptoe into that space? As an agency, as creative, as strategy, as partners?
Well, I'm not saying don't experiment. Yeah. What I'm saying is be very, very cautious, particularly as you will start to learn things. And we've seen this in every phase of the internet, where we learned a little bit more, and it could get creepy. And I think we all know, or hopefully we all know what I'm talking about here. I'm advocating, moving forward and experimenting, but also being cautious as you acquire data as you like, particularly location and privacy, PII type stuff, which can come through these channels. I think we just need to be very careful as we do this moving forward.
Yeah, I think the old adage of just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it very much applies here. You go back to what is the core value of what your brand offers and stay authentic to it, and don't just advertise through it. At the end of the day, it is what you provide of value that may be partnerships, talking about things that you authentically can offer that maybe other brands can't, in the sense of things that are important to communities, neighborhoods, physical locations. Those are all fertile ground to explore of how you can use this new delivery vehicle to allow that to enhance and enrich people's lives.
I think one of the other things is that some of this data can actually help brands become less creepy, which is an interesting way to, when you flip it around. So I'll give you an example. When I checked into the hotel, I went online to get the Wi-Fi going, and the hotel cookied me, or someone cookied me, and now I'm getting ads for the hotel that I'm staying at every time I go online. So there's a tremendous amount of waste there. Had they had the real data that they actually knew that I was there, they wouldn't do that, and I would actually feel it wouldn't be as creepy to me. So I think that there's ways that we can be very positive by taking real world data and saying, okay, we know that there's a relationship between this product and this consumer. Let's take that data and help inform some of the other media because we know a little bit more about them. And I think it's great, like having a filter of no creep is absolutely what we should all be striving for. But to give people experiences, and I think sometimes when we don't have enough data, we can be almost creepier than when we know something and can be smart about it.
Okay, I think we'll wrap it. Okay, I want to thank everyone for coming in today, and thank the panelists, and please have more beer, and thank your waitresses, and thank you, Jamie.
I want to thank the super suckers.